Take your fiscal responsibility in this year.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hope you all had a better weekend than I did. As you can hear, I'm a little sick, but that's the joy of being a parent when you got some young kids. Now for today's video, I want to take a step back from the foreign interference situation that we've been covering, even though a whole lot of new information has come out that I do want to tackle. But for today, I want to look at an announcement that happened over the weekend by none other than Chrystia Freeland. And this announcement had to do with the capital gain tax, which if you remember back in April was part of the 2024 budget. However, they separated it so that it can now be voted on separately. And the vote, I believe, is going to be happening on June 25th. With all that being said, I want you to take a listen to how disconnected this woman is from reality.
And Prime Minister Brian Mulroney raised the capital gains inclusion rate to 75%, higher than the rate we're establishing today. Yet, I have heard from some Canadians who are concerned. No one likes paying more tax, even those who can afford it the most. And to those Canadians, I want to say, we applaud your hard work and your success. You are making great contributions to our country. And we want more Canadians to enjoy success as you do and to contribute as you are.
Right off the bat, these guys are just stuck in a time capsule. The Liberals, the NDP, they love talking about the previous governments, like from way back when. It's bad enough that they talk about Harper all the time, but now she's talking about Brian Mulroney. That was like mid-80s, early 90s as the prime minister. And sure, his capital gains tax was at 75%, and you guys are about 67.5, I believe it is. But what relevance is that to Canadians today? Especially the ones that you're saying you're trying to help out. None of them would have been affected by that. They're getting affected by it now. Not to mention how condescending she sounds by saying, we know that you've worked hard to get where you're at, but you know what? We're going to take more from you anyway, because we need to give the other people who haven't worked as hard as you a fair and equal chance. Like, where are you living? What planet do you live on? And it's going to get worse as she's going to start rattling off different things.
But I would also like to ask Canada's 1%. In fact, Canada's 0.13% to consider this. What kind of a Canada do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country where kids go to school hungry? Do you want to live in a country where a teenage girl gets pregnant just because she doesn't have the money to buy birth control? Do you want to live in a country where the only young Canadians who can buy their own homes are those with parents who can help with the down payment?
You know what's a good way to have kids not go to school hungry? Is to allow their parents to buy groceries at a reasonable price, like getting rid of the carbon tax or putting stipulations on big grocers who are just price gouging Canadians. That way, we wouldn't need a school program because guess what? We could afford the groceries to feed our own children. And speaking of children, I don't get why they keep using this teenage girl example of getting pregnant because she can't afford contraception. There's a very free form of contraception that's accessible to everybody. It's called abstinence. And I think we should be focused on that instead of promoting children to be having sex just because they can get free contraception now. And I get it. Hormones are blooming. They're in the thrill of things. But they need to know that there's consequences for actions, not just, hey, you get free contraception now. Go crazy. Do whatever you want to do. Because there's other ramifications and burdens that puts on them and the systems out there. But then we get to her last point there where she's talking about how the young Canadians, the only way they'll be able to get a house is if their parents help them with a down payment. That's not new. That's been happening for decades now. Usually parents will try to save some sort of a nest egg or some savings that they can give to their kids when they're trying to get their first house or pay for college or whatever the case may be. Parents usually save money to give them for their kids so that they can purchase something later on. That's not a new concept. Or if they have the means, they usually gift them something, like, we've had this house in the family for a long time, or this land, and here you are, you can have it. But even now, people are getting screwed because of the capital tax, like this 93-year-old lady.
There's a couple of lots there that you could build on. And of course, they were thrilled.
Diachen's lawyer told her even though she was giving the land away, she would still have to get it appraised to pay capital gains.
And I said, why should I pay capital gain? You know, I'm not selling it to them. I'm gifting it to them.
One lot has a hydro tower on it and the other is partial wetlands. Still, it was valued at over $250,000. Diachen was told she must pay $40,000 in capital gains taxes.
I said, are you kidding? Are you kidding? I'm on pension. Like, how am I going to pay for that?
The government said changes to the capital gains system will only impact Canada's richest citizens.
We're making Canada's tax system more fair by ensuring that the very wealthiest pay their fair share.
Liz, are you rich?
Are you kidding me? I'm 93 years old. Like, who's going to give me a mortgage? Or who's going to give me a loan?
Yet here we have Chrystia Freeland saying she's only targeting the 1% or the 0.13% of the rich people out there. When now this poor lady who's on a pension, a fixed income, now owes $40,000 because she's simply trying to help out her own family by gifting them some land. Just so very, very disconnected. But it continues.
Do you want to live in a country where we make the investments we need in healthcare, in housing, in old age pensions, but we lack the political will to pay for them and choose instead to pass a ballooning debt onto our children? Do you want to live in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury, but must do so in gated communities behind ever higher fences, using private health care and airplanes, because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of their less privileged compatriots burns so hot?
I'm not sure if she knows how capitalism works, but we're not a socialist society. We have equality of opportunities, but we don't have equality of outcomes. So yeah, if somebody puts forward the effort, makes the money that they made, and is capitalizing on that to live in a gated community or have luxurious things, so be it. But she's literally describing the leader of her own party. Justin Trudeau is this trust fund baby that she's here describing, somebody with their own jets, their own planes. Like, how does she not see the irony in any of what she's saying here? And she herself, I'm sure, has taken advantage of it, all of this. No doubt that she jet sets around, going from place to place on either the private plane or just flying in general. Does she think regular Canadians have the income to just buy flights regularly, week to week to week, to go make different announcements in different places? No. She flies on jets to go to the WEF conferences or to G7 meetings. Like, she is just so disconnected. And she tries to make this a non-political thing, she says. This shouldn't be political. But then in the same breath, she says that you need to keep an eye on who votes no to the capital gains increase, because that will show really who's there for Canadians and who's not. And even the media pushes back on her, saying, aren't you just using this as a political tool?
You said before that you were not targeting this particular motion at making the Conservatives sort of take a side, but you also, even earlier today, you talked about this as not being a partisan issue. So how come you're suggesting that this is not actually going after the Conservatives to force them to take a position by making this a standalone Ways and Means motion?
Thank you for the question. It's not unusual for a major tax measure like this one to be put forward in standalone legislation. That's quite ordinary practice. And I do think it's an important political moment for Canada and for Canadians. We do think this is an important time for our country. It's an important time because we need investments, and it's an important time for us all to take a stand on how we feel those investments should be financed. And as I said in my opening remarks, I do think this is a moment when Canadians should be watching closely what happens in the House and watching closely to see how all MPs vote on this, I would say, defining measure.
Well, believe me, Canadians are going to be watching for this vote because whoever votes for this simply is not listening to Canadians. You say you're only targeting the 1% or the 0.13%, yet it's the middle class that are getting affected by this. As you just saw, a 93-year-old getting hit with 40 grand. That's a big chunk of change that she now has to cough up or scrounge to deal with. And even if you're directly not being affected by this, indirectly you will be. There's been multiple reports we've covered on this channel as well, how doctors are getting screwed over by the capital gains tax and are potentially going to be closing up shop or looking to move somewhere else to practice, which will put more strain on our already crumbling healthcare system. We got less and less doctors, less qualified people, and now if you're going to be making them leave because they're going to be getting screwed out of their retirement, well, that's actually going to affect us more than the 1% who can go and pay for their private health care, like you said earlier. But there's so many more examples of how tone deaf these liberals, and especially Chrystia Freeland, is, because at the same announcement, she was talking about how the Bank of Canada has lowered their interest rate, and that's because they were being fiscally responsible due to their budget, I guess, and they were patting themselves on the back for this, when it actually has nothing to do with it. It's because Canadians can't afford anything, so inflation has nowhere else to go but down because nothing's being bought.
Now, Canada could finance these critical investments by taking on more debt. But that would place an unfair burden on our younger generations. Fiscal responsibility matters, and our fiscally responsible approach is, in part, what enabled Canada to lower interest rates this past week, the first G7 country to do so. Interest rates are coming down because inflation is falling. Inflation fell to 2.7% in April, down from 2.9% in March. That's 4 months in a row that inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. That's good news. In fact, inflation has fallen to its lowest level in 3 years, and wage growth has now outpaced inflation for 15 months in a row. Today, almost 1.3 million more Canadians are working compared to before the pandemic. The OECD expects the Canadian economy to see the second fastest rate of growth among the G7 this year, and the fastest growth in 2025, tied only with the US.
She talks about how 1.3 new jobs have been there. Well, that's probably because you let in 1.5 immigrants into the country. But it's not even just me saying all this. Listen to the panelists and the analysts that were Liberals, Conservatives, and NDP members who were saying how tone deaf the Liberal Party is, in particular Chrystia Freeland, and they actually prove her numbers incorrect as well.
I'd like to echo the Governor of the Bank of Canada, who said this was a moment for us to enjoy. Canada is the first G7 country where interest rates have been lowered. Our economic plan is working.
Taking credit for the cut, that's Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland this week celebrating the Bank of Canada's interest rate cut and praising her government's fiscal policy for helping, quote, create the economic conditions for the central bank to lower its rate. The bank did cut its key lending rate for the first time in 4 years this week by 25 basis points. After nearly a year stuck at 5%, the rate is now at 4.75%. So is the rate cut an inflection point that Liberals can and should celebrate? And what does it mean for the opposition? Scott, I'll start with you. What was your initial reaction to the way in which the finance minister framed the cut for Canadians?
I thought it was extremely helpful because I thought what they might be able to do is to take videotape of that conversation, put it into National Caucus, and do a TED Talk on how this is the way to exactly not communicate where we are in the economy and what our economic message to Canadians is. It was really frustrating because it's so tone deaf. Look, there are three things they've got to do in this situation. One, do not take credit, give credit. That means give credit to Canadians. Say, listen, it's because Canadians have been working hard, sticking with the plan, and we're starting to see signs of hope. We're starting to turn the corner. This interest rate cut means that there are better times and better opportunities ahead. Second, talk about the fact that their plan going forward is focused on making sure the Canadians are the beneficiaries of an improving outlook. Don't take credit. Don't talk about the past. Talk instead about the future. And then the third thing, of course, is contrast it with the Conservative plan. Say now what people have to think about is, do you want to continue to make momentum? Or do you want to stop and take their approach? But standing up and saying, whoa, I'm spiking the football. Whoops, we're not actually in the end zone. Very bad communications.
If they were to switch gears, Kathleen, and sort of do what Scott is saying and focus more on like what we're going to do with the future, what is the best message from your perspective they can try and land?
Yeah, I think they've made an error this week with their kind of almost popping up a mission accomplished banner. I mean, that is a real mistake because people are still feeling a lot of pain, right? We see, you know, high shelter costs, high grocery store. People are afraid to go to the grocery store, right? Take a vacation. And I think that that's a real challenge that if as Scott said, you know, the Liberals are tone deaf to that, they're going to make a mistake. So we can see all the parties doing a different strategy, right? So that's the Liberals' mission accomplished, or almost there. The Conservatives, of course, are actually dismissing the cut altogether, saying it doesn't mean anything. Canada's still broken and you're still poor and life is miserable. And the Democrats are saying something different. You know, they're saying you still need help. That's why you hire MPs every 4 years or so. That's what the government's supposed to do. It's supposed to help its citizens. And so we're working on policies to do that. But in terms of the Liberals, to your question of how they can pivot and what they can do, I think they need to double down on we need to do more. That it hasn't been their fiscal policies that have gotten us to where they are, and that Canadians still need help. We're at, 20-year highs in terms of grocery prices. Wages still haven't kept up with inflation. People are still hurting. The economy, the labor stats were just out late last week too, and there is growing unemployment, especially with that cohort of new graduates, and particularly young women are having trouble in the labor market. They need to start addressing that and starting helping Canadians more largely with some of the fiscal policy measures that they can work on, not monetary.
Oh, very interesting that the demographic that you're trying to help, the younger Canadians, are the ones that are dealing with the highest unemployment rates. And as she states, wages have not kept up with cost of living, yet our debt is through the roof. We're getting tax increases. In Ontario here, you get a check of just under $300 4 times a year, which I don't know what that's supposed to do because of the carbon tax. But we have to thank them because due to their fiscal policy, the Bank of Canada now lowered the interest rate from 5 to 4.75%, all thanks to the Liberals. Nobody else. It's just them. Anyways, guys, this is just my opinion on the whole situation. Love to hear what you guys think about it. Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.